Eytiar. Cassie and a few of his Xixs followed Leonardo's tracks to the east. The moon served as their light and they moved quickly, following broken branches and Leonardo's footsteps. They emerged from the woods out to the wide tundra. Since they never went to the tundra, for it was empty of any life. It was barren of trees and animals, and the only life that grew there were the waist-high shrubs. On top, the 19s looked like a centipede combing the wide open space. They moved in twos. From the top of the fortress, the sharp eyes of the Malservia guards alerted the others, seeing the Xixs coming towards them. As in the past, they never failed to do their job. They did not keep anyone alive that got near the fortress, even the animals that were lost. This was the first time that they had been visited by another kind from the west. The gates of the fortress opened, releasing hundreds of their defenders. They would ensure that no one could escape. They moved to enclose the uninvited visitors. Cassie slowed down and stopped, sensing something from beyond. He made a gesture and the Xixs sat down on the ground. The wild shrubs hid their bodies up to the neck. He felt something unusual in the air. Though he saw nothing before them, his instincts were telling him that there was danger waiting if they would continue to make a few more hundred steps. He motioned for the 19s to draw their arrows, and to light them up. The Malservia saw a flash of light from where the Xixs were. It became 2, 3, until the land at afar had flickering lights forming a line. They saw the lights move up at the same time, and like a comet, it shot up into the sky in different directions towards them. The 19s unleashed their arrows towards the unknown horizon. They watched their thin straight projectiles landed. Some reached the fortress while the others hit a few Malservias lurking on the ground. The Xixs saw some life moved helplessly as the fire from their arrows engulfed a few bodies. It was then that Cassie ordered the retreat, and all together, the Xixs dropped to the ground and crawled away. When they knew they were far, they alighted and ran fast towards the woods of the forest. At Eytiar, Cassie told Eytiar of their find. Eytiar was standing on the balcony of his wooden house, watching over the flickering lights from the houses of other Xixs across a short alley. He turned his face towards Cassie, who was holding a wooden container filled with wine while leaning his head and body on the wooden wall. He balanced himself with his left foot while the other one was bent against the wall. The lamps inside the large high-ceiling room were making Cassie's shadows touched Eytiar's body from the chest down as Eytiar began to speak. "Are you sure that the foreigner was from the southeast?" "No doubt, his tracks lead to there." Eytiar walked past Cassie to a small table inside the room. He grabbed a container and poured wine for himself. He was thinking. His fingers were tapping the sides of the wooden jug that he was holding. "I never thought there are living kinds in the southeast. Who do you think they are?" "I don't know. We were not able to go any farther. There were many bodies that we saw hiding on the bushes. They were blocking our path as if they were hunters waiting for us like their prey. They had seen us coming." "What do they look like?" Cassie was shaking his head. He pushed himself and walked towards the veranda. He leaned against it facing Eytiar. "I don't know, but they are dark and bulky. I've never seen them before. What I am certain is that the foreigner came from there. His tracks lead to where a long fortress rests." "A fortress?" "Yes. We shot arrows in the direction where I think some danger was waiting for us. It's amazing. I thought our arrows just froze in the air as it stopped from dropping down to the ground. I just realized that it hit something when fire started to burn some woods. Then, I realized it was a fortress. There must be some civilization there, and for sure they do not want anyone to come near them." Eytiar took a sip of his wine and looked at Cassie. If the foreigner came from there and was heading to Ozalbeneg, he could be a spy or a messenger. But something doesn't seem to fit. Ozalbenegs only know the Reds and never crossed our territory. They had never been to the southeast. He helped the Nuga and the enemy. I couldn't tie the knots. Maybe he was their prisoner who escaped. The sizes of the kinds that we saw do not fit the footprints of the foreigner. Those in the fortress were smaller, and I don't think the visitor is like them, judging from his footsteps and the distance of his pace as he walked. Also, I don't think those dark bodies out there can climb trees. They are all bulky. The Malservias. What? I think the ones that you saw are the Malservias. The what? Malservius Cassi. They were inhabitants of a land in the north called Tuz. We know nothing of them but only from stories. They deserted Tuz at a time that the northern Reds, and the Vamouths, mercenaries, attacked Xereclida and killed all the males. Stories say that the Malservius left their land fearing the mercenaries too, for they have some precious stones that were wanted in the north. No one knew where they went, and the south was a good place to go. It was far and no one lives there except the animals and migratory birds from the east. They must be what you saw, and the fortress is their defense walls against those who hunt them as well. Cassi was speechless and watched. Eytiar turned around, leaned his body on the veranda, and drank his wine. He faced Cassi once more. The foreigner could be a spy of the northern Reds and was just lost here. He is not going to Ozalbeneg but back to the Red land. I don't think he is a Red, Eytiar. The foreigner is definitely larger than the Reds. He is from the north. Northern Reds are larger than the Reds in the south, Cassi. Though we've never seen one, the Reds at Ozalbeneg told of their race in the north that looked like a Sumik. The Reds were nothing but Sumiks then from Igathansha, but through the years, their features changed due to the Xixs and now the Ozalbenegs because of interracial marriages. So, you think he was sent by the Reds to look for the Malservius? But for what? I don't know. As I told you, Malservius have some precious stones. Maybe that is the reason why the Reds are searching for them, for what they have. If he reached the Red land and told his find, there is a possibility that the Reds will come and pass through our forest. The foreigner had seen this side, and for sure he can say that this is the best way to reach the Malservius in the south, for the great river up north is unforgiving. They will not be allowed at Ozalbeneg, I am sure. Eytiar smiled and shook his head. You are forgetting, Cassi, that there are Reds in our land, and the mercenaries of the north were all but Reds and Xixs. They can get through there if they want to. They will only have problems with us, for I will not allow any mercenary to step on our territory, for soon they may become interested in us too, and we can suffer the same fate as the males from their vicious desires. Cassi gave a perplexed look at Eytiar. How do we stop them? Eytiar smiled. Relax. I just made up a story and I am not really sure. However, in case, have you lost your faith? We've been living here for several decades now. Xixs will always be with us if ever. Cassi flashed a smile to the leader he respected much. Then he remembered something. It just crossed my mind. You mentioned about the males that were hunted before in the past by the Reds and the Vamouths. Why did the Vamouths allow the Reds to kill the males? Weren't they friends before? Eytiar walked past Cassi and looked at the horizon before him that was filled with fog and a few lights. Yes, they were. When the leader of the Vamouths was killed by the Geradians, things changed. The Vamouths silently blamed the death of their chief on the males, for they loved Xav, the Vamouth chief, so much. They needed to blame somebody for what had happened to Xav, and the males became the closest that they could pour their hate on. It was because the males took care of the Nugas when they were hunted by the Geradians to avenge the death of their prince, and since Xav was a good friend of the males, he protected them and the Nugas against the Geradians. The Geradians instead waged war on the Vamouths, and in that war Xav was killed. Many Vamouths believed that Xav's demise was caused by the act of the males to shelter the Nugas. At that time, the king of the Reds, Xixs, offered Figure, the legendary pirate of the Great River, to the Vamouths. Figure killed many Vamouths before, and his arrest and eventual handing over by the Reds to the Vamouths made the Vamouths trust the Reds. They opened Nosnev to them, and the Reds helped the Vamouths in their war against the Geradians, who stopped their offensive thinking that Igathansha's soldiers were helping the Vamouths. They didn't know that the Sumiks who were helping the Vamouths were just the Reds of King Xixs. The Vamouths and the Reds became good friends since, but what the Vamouths didn't know was that they were just used by the Reds to get to Xereclida, where the males lived. The king of the Reds, Xixs, saw an opportunity, sensing that the Vamouths started to distance themselves with the males. Stories say that Xixs murdered a few Vamouths and told Xixs, the Vamouths' new chief, that his soldiers saw that the males did it. He was easily believed by the angered families of those he murdered, who pressured Xixs to take action against the males. Xixs, like his father Xav, had to know the truth and went to Xereclida with his warriors. It was then that King Sekrim offered his help. Sugnif knew that his warriors could take the males by themselves in case the males fight them. He knew that the males were incapable of fighting. He declined the king's offer, but the king still insisted despite this, against his will, and when they were going to Zereklada, Sugnif was surprised that King Sekrim still sent his army, who joined in their march towards Zereklada. When they reached Zereklada, the Reds just attacked the males. The brutal way at which the Sumiks killed the males made many Vamouth warriors still. They just watched. Sugnif tried to stop them, but he was not listened. He didn't bring too many warriors to defend the males against the attack of King Sekrim's soldiers, for he was not expecting that they will engage the males in a fight. He decided to do nothing but watch, for he too feared the many mercenaries that joined them inside Zereklada. It was only when Sugnif's son, who replaced Sugnif as chief after his death, found the diary of Zav, that the Vamouths understood why the Reds killed the males. Zav wrote that the expensive gem wanted in the north was the very eyes of the males, the same and most expensive blue stones that were wanted at Igathansha, Bixar, Geradia, and even at Nosneven. The blue stones were the eyes of the males, said Cassie with widened eyes. Yes, it was. It was the reason why the males were killed and now believed to be extinct. For years they had been hunted, and I think even to this very day. Some believed there were survivors in that carnage, but for so many years, no one ever had found any males again. They were all wiped out. None survived. Eytiar took another sip and cleared his wet lips with his tongue. I believe there were survivors, but wherever they are, I am sure they know now why they need to be away from the sight of any kind. For years I have not heard of any male sighting except for one story from the Geradians. They believe that the males still exist in the far south, but anyone who ventured there never returned. Some large group of another kind was living. Eytiar froze. Cassie was confused, watching Eytiar staring with wide eyes on the dark before him. He began to speak in an almost whisper that Cassie was still able to hear. It was believed that the far south is inhabited by the Malservius. When the Bixers failed to invade Igathansha, the Sumiks went to Bixar and fought the remaining Bixers' army there. However, there was a large group of a kind who appeared from inside Bixar and fought the Sumik army. The Sumiks were unprepared for it and they were driven away. It was believed that the kinds who helped Bixar are the Malservius. How could it be when Malservius didn't exist anymore? It could be the Reds who helped them. That is not possible, Cassie. The Reds even joined the Sumiks in that attack. The Reds did not forget the war at Igathansha when the Bixers killed King Sekrim and they were left alone fighting the enraged Sumiks, and those who helped the Bixers fit the description you saw in the southeast. But why would the Malservius help Bixar? Eytiar filled his mouth with wine once again and looked far out to the dark horizon below them while resting the palm of his hands on the smooth wood before him. I think it is about nature, Cassie. Eytiar's eyes were beginning to droop. His subconscious mind was now speaking as he glanced at the bewildered Cassie. Why are we here in a mountain and left our families at Ozalbeneg? We were Ozalbenegs, and we are until now, but our land back there is no longer the same as it was. Greed, power, and lust for wealth consumed the minds of many of us. We allowed ourselves to be taken over by those who wanted us for what we have. Bixar was helped by the unknown kinds for something that Bixar has, or maybe they too wanted Igathansha for themselves. Igathansha is a very rich and progressive country that has so much to attract other kinds to have it. But it is not easy for any invader to just go into their soils. One has to have a massive force to succeed in conquering that land. No one knows where the Malservius really came from, and stories say that they just emerged from the swamps at Tuz as if certain magic gave them life. The Vamouths and the Bixers were the first ones who saw them, but they ignored the Malservius, thinking that they were just but forest beasts. However, some red sailors happened to dock at Tuz and discovered that it was inhabited by a kind who could communicate. The Malservius developed ties using their stone-rich land. They traded their diamonds with the sailors for clothes, potteries, shields and weapons. The Xixs learned of this and they too were lured to come to Xixs to sell their products to the Malservius. The once thought of as beasts and animals became popular with the Reds and the Xixs, who profited much from them until one day, the inhabitants of Xixs vanished, leaving Xixs with nothing but its swamps and its beasts. No one knew what had happened to the Malservius, where they went and why they left Xixs. Others say they were swept away by the great river, while others believe they still exist but in another place, away from the bandits and pirates who also learned about them. They too were hunted by the mercenaries and pirates for their riches that others believed they carried with them on their departure. I think I know why they helped Xixs, Eytiar. Eytiar looked at Cassie. As you said, Malservius purchased weapons from the Reds and the Xixs, then it must be the reason why they helped Xixs. They needed Xixs to have weapons to defend themselves against those who were looking for them for their riches. Eytiar turned silent. Cassie's thoughts fitted the possibility. Xixs was known as a country that manufactured good weapons. Their lands were rich in metals and their neighboring countries like the Reds and Eytiar purchased from them then. Weapons, he thought. Eytiar touched his chin and bowed his head as he thought back about the Malservius, the story of the Geradians who fought with some dark kinds in the south, the Xixs' encounter with the armed and dark bodies in the southeast, and the kind who helped Xixs in the past. They were all described similar to the lost Malservius of Xixs. He then thought of the possibility that the foreigner in their forest was not from the Red Land but from Eytiar. Since the failed invasion of the Xixs, Eytiar had never been complacent. The foreigner that was lost in their forest could be Eytiar's soldiers spying on the south and the west for possible threats against their land, he thought. Cassie, go back to the southeast. Find out what it is really there at the back of the fortress and who the kinds were. We must know if they are really the Malservius. Cassie knew Eytiar very well. He was trying to find some more lost pieces to fit whatever it is on his head now. He dared not to ask a question anymore but just nodded as he excused himself from Eytiar. He headed towards the quarters where the warrior Xixs were and told them about their mission. It will be a long night tomorrow, Cassie thought.